Town Bank Mortgage, NMLS number 512138, is an equal housing lender. This podcast is for informational purposes only. And now, the man born with a 5 o'clock shadow and with the NMLS number 2028-201. He is a gentleman. He is a scholar. He is
Tyler Cralle.
Well, it was a day of double jobs reports. I don't know if it was double the fun. Just kind of mixed, I'll be honest. But we got jobs data, we got retail data, and we're going to talk about how that impacts rates. Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of Wilmington Mortgage. I am the aforementioned host of this podcast, Tyler Cralle, of course, loan officer, Town Bank Mortgage, right here in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we break down the reason why rates are moving the way that they are. And today I have some good news to report that rates are down for the second straight day. Nothing huge. As of broadcast, we're about an hour away from the close. The 10-year is down about 3 basis points on top of yesterday's 2 basis point move. So 2 days, 5 basis points. Not bad. Just saying. Some positive movement with regards to the 10-year. And that's actually translating into some decent movement as well from the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Mortgage News Daily's index has it at 6.27%, down 2 basis points from Monday's close. And that's actually the second lowest level since early December. So we are actually also seeing, I think it was Rick Palacios. I think that's how you say his last name. He was pointing to that Bloomberg article about how Fannie and Freddie are adding more mortgages to their bond portfolio, and that could shrink the spread between the 10-year and the 30-year. And so we could be seeing some benefit of that. So that's why you could see, mortgage rates actually maybe fall a little bit more than what is happening with the 10-year. But we'll see. We'll see if that happens. But let's talk about why the 10-year is down, and that is the double jobs report that we got this morning. We got October data and we got November data. And if you're just looking at the headline number, you would think that it was like just a huge swing from one way to the other. If you're just looking at the headline number, but you got to go deeper. So this is the headline that I think a lot of people saw, which threw them off, because in October, the economy shed 105,000 jobs. That's a lot of jobs. We've seen some negative reports. 105,000, that is a lot of jobs. And then we saw the November report that showed that the economy added 64,000 jobs. And so it was like, wow, we lost 105,000 jobs in October. We gained 64,000 jobs in November. What a swing. Well, the 105,000 job loss is a little bit misleading because 162,000 government jobs were lost in October. They were deferred layoffs that had been announced earlier in the year. So remember when Doge was in full effect in Washington and they were doing the buyouts of people that wanted to, leave their job, people that would take the buyout offer, all of that kind of, discussion that was going around. That was the result, I believe. And so they finally hit the rolls. And so you saw 162,000 jobs lost in the government, but the economy only shed 105,000 jobs, which means that about 57,000 jobs were created by the private sector. And so that's it's not great, but it's not horrible. So you got the private sector creating 57,000 jobs and the government losing 162,000 jobs. But once again, not really just from that month. Those were deferred layoffs that happened earlier in the year. So once again, top line number deceiving. Actual data, 57,000 jobs, which is kind of in line with what we saw in November, which was 64,000 jobs being created, which is more than economists were expecting. I think the estimate that I saw was about 45,000. So we saw more jobs created in November than economists were expecting. But we did see kind of very similar months, 64,000, 57,000. Once again, not great, but not awful. We're not seeing job loss, contrary to the headline number. The unemployment rate, though, did jump to 4.6%. That was up. It's a big jump from 4.4% in September. We did not get October data for unemployment. That 4.6% is the highest level since September 2021. Now, it should be noted, and Heather Long, Navy Federal chief economist, noted on X, 46,000 of the 64,000 jobs were in healthcare. So that's like 71, almost 72%. In fact, Heather Long noted that the U.S. would actually have lost jobs in the past 6 months if it wasn't for healthcare. So healthcare is really kind of propping up the economy right now with regards to job creation. And so that can be kind of a sign that there's a problem. We're not seeing job growth throughout the economy. It's only happening in one industry. That definitely could be a problem. But it should also be noted that I think in 2024, the average job creation per month was about 184,000. And I think this year we're about 54,000. And so once again, looking at those numbers, oh my gosh, the economy is doing so much worse. However, RBC had a note on this, I want to say a couple months ago, talking about what the replacement rate would be. So the replacement rate when it comes to jobs is every month, you have certain people leave the labor force, retirement, death, unfortunately, other reasons, sickness, whatever it may be. And then you have people join the economy. And so during the pandemic, probably like in the heat of the pandemic, it was probably 150. We needed to create 150,000 jobs to deal with the people who are entering the workforce, whether it was people who maybe retired, were coming back to work, people who had left because they couldn't find a job, they were then coming back, new people coming into the economy, had been delayed because of the pandemic. There were no, people just weren't hiring kind of at the start of the pandemic out of concern for what was going to happen with the economy. You had immigrants coming in large, a lot of people coming into the country. And so that created a higher replacement rate of around, we need 150,000 jobs just to keep the economy kind of where it was. And so that number has fallen. Once again, one of the big reasons has been immigration. We are now seeing a lot fewer people coming into the country. I'm trying to think how to word that. And so now RBC was arguing that the replacement rate in this economy is probably around 40 to 50,000. So even though, once again, the 57,000 number and the 64,000 number are well below the average that we saw in 2024, we're actually probably still a little bit above the replacement rate. So like I said, not great. I'm not saying, oh, wow, the economy is doing so great, but it's not as bad as it appears. Now, one of the big problems is if healthcare is such a huge component, what happens if healthcare starts to, we get this whole Obamacare subsidy debate. What if healthcare hits the skids? Then we could have a problem. So I think one of the reasons why you're seeing rates fall is because the jobs data is not horrible, but there are warning signs. And so you have, it's really only one industry that's creating most of the job growth, where the government was responsible for a lot of, the job loss that we saw in October and even November. I think it was down about 10,000. But we're seeing, unemployment rate rises. So we're seeing warning signs. Not enough to cause the Fed to lower rates, probably until there's a new Fed chair, but they're there. And I think that's sort of the reaction from investors. And so that's why we got bond yields down about 3 basis points today. And then, of course, adding to that, we also got retail sales. And so retail sales were actually pretty bad. So retail sales, there was not big expectations, but they didn't even meet those. So retail sales were unchanged in October. That was the weakest showing since May and was down from the anemic 0.1% growth that we saw in September. In fact, economists were projecting another 0.1% increase in retail sales, and they couldn't even meet that. So very kind of weak projection, didn't even meet that. So why were retail sales flat? Well, they were dragged down Auto sales were down over 1.5%. Gardening and building supplies dropped 0.9%. Sales at gas stations also declined. They were down 0.8%. And then offsetting that, department stores, I don't know what was going on in October, jumped 5%, almost 5% in October. Furniture sales were up 2.3%, and sporting goods stores were up 1.8%. But for the most part, like I said, flat. Sales were flat. And then it's important to remember that retail sales are not adjusted for inflation, and we do not have October inflation data, neither CPI or PCE. We're not going to get it. We are going to get a November report later this week, but we're not getting October data. But I'm just going to go on a limb here due to the fact that the November report is projected to show year-over-year inflation rising to about 3.2%, kind of a big jump. I'm going to guess that prices were not flat in October. I'm going to guess they rose anywhere from 0.1 to 0.4. Let's just say 0.2. So that would mean that retail sales are not keeping pace with inflation. Once again, not, oh my gosh, the economy is horrible, but warning signs. There's a CNBC survey out recently. I think we talked about it yesterday. 41% of consumers said they're going to spend less this Christmas than they did prior. That was up from 2024. So, we've been seeing these signs that there's a concern about inflation. People are really feeling the pinch, and it hasn't really shown up in the data. We're seeing it in surveys, but we haven't really seen it in the data. And this is really kind of the first sign that we're seeing consumers are like, you know what? I can't do it. And so once again, not, oh my gosh, this is going to cause the Fed to lower rates. Consumers are hurting, especially when what's hurting consumers is inflation, and lowering rates would probably actually cause inflation to go up. So they could borrow more money, true, but it would probably cause prices to go up. And, if someone's already strapped for cash, they might not be able to access new capital. They might not be able to borrow any more money. So lowering rates wouldn't actually help them. But it is a warning sign. That's my whole point. We're not seeing anything like, oh my gosh, the bottom's about to fall out. But what we're seeing is signs of a weakening economy, which of course flies in the face of the data that projections that we saw from the Fed last week, that they're expecting 2026 to be better than they had originally projected. But, we're seeing a weakening labor market, retail sales not keeping pace with inflation. Warning signs. Warning signs. Say it again. Warning signs. All right, before we go, I love this so much. There's like an apprentice quality to all of this. So 3 weeks ago, we were all convinced Kevin Hassett was going to be the guy to be the Fed chair. This week, Warsh is back in the conversation. We got the two Kevins. And now the Wall Street Journal is reporting that President Trump is set to interview Federal Reserve Chair or Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller tomorrow about the Fed chair position. So he's keeping us guessing. He is keeping us guessing. So now we got possibly 3 names that are in there. Like I said, keeping us guessing. All right, that's it. We are done. So once again, another good day for rates. We will take it. Good day for mortgage rates as well. But you guys hopefully enjoyed your Tuesday. We'll be back here Wednesday for another edition of Wilmington Mortgage. And remember, as always, do not wait to buy real estate. You buy real estate and wait.